Welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. Today we'll be talking about reapplying after going unmatched and how you can work your reapplication like a strategist. I'll be giving you key insights on what you would do in this second go around, on how you're going to pivot if you need to, creating a backup strategy plan, and realizing that not matching does not mean that you are scarred forever. Okay, so if this is you, stay tuned, hit subscribe if this is your first time listening to the podcast. If you are listening on Apple, Spotify, do add us to your favorite show so that you can continue to get more of this. Let's get into it. So you did not match and you haven't emailed anyone since, you haven't asked for any feedback. Why is that? Now, one of the key things I recommend for my students inside the program first is once you go unmatched, the first thing I want you to do is ask for feedback. And feedback is tricky because feedback could be very hurtful. Feedback is emotional sometimes, and feedback can make us feel a lot more upset and relive the pain of the failure, the rejection, or just the fact that we did not match once before. So how do we do this? We're going to break this down into 5 sections. In the first section, I want to first talk about what you are feeling after going unmatched. And then I'm going to proceed into the audit that you're going to run for your feedback loop. And then you're going to learn how to read the feedback you get correctly and not misunderstand it or misrepresent it. And then we'll talk about what changes on your application and what you leave alone for the next cycle. And we'll close with how you're going to finalize this and reframe that as a strategy and not a failure. So the first thing I want to debunk is the misconception that not matching automatically now flags you as some kind of unwanted applicant. This is untrue, okay? You applying into the match more than once does not mean that you are less than, or that there is now a label on your application that says that you're incapable of 1, 2, or 3 tasks that are expected of a future resident. That is a misconception that is not grounded in truth, and therefore it's something that we should just eliminate all, just take it all out of the picture. There's no one keeping track of how many times you apply to the point of it negatively affecting your current application cycle. The only one tracking that information is you, rightfully, but no one is using that as a judgment tool to weed you out of the application pool. The things that are often used to filter, obviously, are the score sets, the application status. So applying as a foreign medical graduate sometimes can be a process of elimination automatically from certain programs, but not all, some. So it's important that you realize that not matching, look at it as a mathematical problem. Look at it as there are only so many spots for all the applications that are coming in, and therefore there's always going to be spots that are not filled. And you can question that by saying there are on-field spots that stay empty and don't get filled, even though I'm a competitive applicant. 1, did you apply there? That's the question I'll have for you. And 2, do those spots remain unfilled throughout the year, or do they get filled after the times when you had recently checked it? So the first thing that I want to talk about in this episode really is the shame, and why shame is the real obstacle in a reapplication cycle. Because sometimes we think it's our score, we think it's our gaps, but no, it's really how shameful that we are feeling. And shame as an emotion is a complex negative emotion. It is an emotion that allows us to, it usually is born out of thoughts, okay? And those thoughts are thoughts that we have created based on circumstances. And the circumstance is on match day, you got that email that scarred your nervous system almost for life, right? Until you found this video and you're ready to reframe that. It scarred your nervous system to think of yourself as someone who is not able or incapable in one way or the other. And what really hurts is you know that you have the ability to perform once you're given the opportunity to be a resident. Because 1, you've already gone to medical school. 2, you've practiced already in your home country. And so you're coming to the table with a lot of experience and expertise. And so shame is the emotion that you're having to live with that is based off of these thoughts that are now validating failure. They're validating the fact that you did not get this opportunity the first go around, and therefore you've deducted meaning out of it to say that it has something to do with who you are fundamentally as a person, fundamentally as an applicant, and therefore you are not worthy or good enough for what you are seeking. And the result of shame is doubt. And doubt, when it involves self-doubt, is one of the biggest levels of sabotage that a person can experience is self-doubt. Because then you don't need any enemies, you don't need any programs to filter you out. You begin to operate to filter yourself out before the opportunities come in your lap. So it's important that we realize that shame is the real obstacle here. Because when I coach people and I tell them the first thing you do after you go unmatched is ask for feedback, they often are met with, if I didn't get this well, why would they want to talk to me now? But I often say, first of all, you don't know if you ended up on the rank list and just the algorithm did not give you the position because there are only so many spots for so many more applicants, right? But more importantly than that, if you refrain from asking for feedback, you'll find yourself in a position where the second cycle comes around and you are still doing the same thing you did the first cycle without any changes. And that's really unhelpful for you. So how do you utilize shame to your advantage? You have to reframe those underlying thoughts and think of it as my match could have happened for things that I'm responsible for. So parts of my application that need improvement, but I wouldn't know that until I get feedback on it, which is why feedback is important. Or my match could have also been sabotaged just by virtue of the algorithm and how that process operates. But when you combine both things and you realize that shame is part of a normal human brain reaction to a painful experience, to a hurtful experience, an experience that hurts our ego, it hurts our definition of who we think we are, our identity as physicians, our identity as intellectually intelligent people. Once you can identify that this is your brain that is processing a negative emotion and allowing you to exhibit and experience this negative emotion in this way, in a way that makes you hide or a way that makes you more afraid to try different things, then you realize that it's just your nervous system trying to protect you from more hurt. Okay? So the fact that you experience shame in this instance of going unmatched, it's your brain and your nervous system allowing you to avoid more scenarios that would potentially put you at risk of future rejection. But that loop is not helpful because you actually need to know now what you need to do in order to work towards the next cycle. So this brings you to part 2 of this video, which is the feedback audit that you need to run. So in your feedback audit, you need to be asking, who do I need to contact? What do I need to ask? How do I ask that? How do I frame it up? Okay. How do I structure this so that it is helpful for me and also the end user? So the end user is the person you're asking for feedback from. I recommend that your feedback loop on who to contact should start with probably the person that you felt you connected most with when you interviewed. So that could be a faculty member, it could be a resident, or it could be the program director themselves. Sometimes people that you connect with on a non-academic level, meaning maybe you connected with them based on a hobby in your application, or you guys had a social discussion about something else, they're more likely to remember you based on that conversation. So that could be the opener of your email. And so it could state, Dr. Loom, it was a pleasure meeting and speaking with you in September of last year when you interviewed me at St. Agnes Medical Center, right? So I'm giving them a frame of reference in that first line so they know why I'm reaching out to them or what I'm talking about. And then the second line or the second paragraph there will follow with, I would love to request your feedback, okay? And you leave it at that with the full stop right there. And then you proceed to say, I went unmatched the prior cycle and I'm working on my reapplication strategy, okay? Period. And you leave it right there. Then you go into the last paragraph, which would be what kind of feedback that you want from them. Because if you just ask for feedback, they may not remember a lot about you or what to say. So you can always, in that last paragraph, suggest, I have included or attached my ERAS CV and personal statement, and I would love to hear back from you on areas that I need to work on my personal statement, experiences that I may need to change or improve, my letter of recommendations if you remember reviewing them. So you want to guide them to the areas that they need to give you feedback on. Because obviously, if they remember your score, they can tell you, oh, your score was low, which is not feedback you can change, though you can work on the next exam. But the things that are dynamic on your application, the things that are changeable, the things that are improvable, which would be entries in your application, your personal statement, experiences, literally your CV, which is your ERAS CV or your residency CAS CV. Those are the areas where they can give you feedback that you can actually implement on change, and it moves the needle for you. So using a template like that, and you can rephrase that, reword that, but the framework there is the opener is a common frame of reference that allows the reader to remember who you are. That follows quickly with exactly your request for feedback, okay? And you follow that subsequently with what you're asking for feedback on, so the application, the personal statement, and then you're directing them or guiding them as to the areas specifically that you wish to hear back on. And you can always leave it with an open-ended question or close it with an open-ended question that allows them to give you general feedback, okay? But you want to end that email with an open-ended question so that you know exactly what's going to come back to you. If this person is intentional about maybe giving you feedback, they will respond to your email. And I usually tell people, if someone doesn't respond to your email, sometimes it's not because they don't like you. It's probably because, like yourself, sometimes you don't read every email. Sometimes you don't open every email. And so it gets hard to track why your email doesn't get a response. It's best, or in your best interest, if you don't go down the rabbit hole of creating a reason why when you really don't know what that person is thinking, okay? The next part to this video is the feedback that you get. What are you going to do with it? So how are you going to apply it to your application? I usually say once you get it, you want to filter through and have an objective mind as well. It could be harsh sometimes. It could be very difficult pill to swallow. I've had a student do this before, and they were told that their LORs were not great. And then she was like, how do I know what was in my LORs? And then how do I change that? The only workaround we could find out was to get new letter writers altogether and then change performance on those rotations so that we can potentially get different set of letters. So for that student, what she did was get different USCE or USCE during this time frame so that she could get new letters through those rotations. That may not apply to everyone, right? Your feedback could be different. It could be related to experiences. It could be related to what you have done, what you're working on, research, or the lack thereof. Whatever it is, you want to read through it through the lens of the big picture. Is this person speaking about this based on their unique program? So is their program research intensive, but then another program down the road is not so much research intensive, and you really have your eyes on programs that are not research intense because maybe that's not a future goal of yours. You want to have just enough to show that you understand research without having detailed research work. So read the feedback through the lens of that person's perspective based on the program that they're in. Because if they're in a program that is heavy on one particular aspect, of course, they will fixate on that. But should you revamp everything based on that one person's perspective? That's the importance of filtering through the lens of, but where are they coming from with this feedback? Okay. So this brings us to the next part, which is how do you then determine what you will change versus what you leave alone? If it is a process that is going to be labor intensive and comes in the way of you studying for the USMLE, I highly suggest you leave it alone because your USMLE performance, in my opinion, will always trump some of these extra experiences that you want to gather more of or just keep adding to your CV, right? And this is applicable for step 2 CK and step 3. If that is an exam that is pressing, it is time sensitive, please focus on that because that would move the needle a lot further for you, especially if you just had a pass on step 1 or you had an attempt on step 1, then you really want to work on your step 3. For those of us who are graduates, because you've already applied the prior year, you want to work on step 3 to really help eliminate that doubt on your ability to get medical licensure down the road. So the last part is reframing your reapplication as a strategy and not a failure. And this is something that you do for yourself. This part is something you do for you and not for somebody else. Nobody else can reframe this for you. And frankly, you're the only one that really cares that it is a reapplication, to be honest, because the programs that you apply to, some of them you may have not applied to the prior cycle. Others you may be reapplying to, but they're not sitting there checking to see how many times you've applied to them. They have a lot of other stuff to filter through. They're not worried about your personal failures, so to speak, right? So once you can realize that the reframing of your reapplication as a strategy is for your own good and not necessarily to prove anything to anyone else in a program anywhere, because frankly, I don't think they care that much. Once you realize that your reframe is for you, then you can calm down and reapply as if you were reapplying or as if you were applying for the first time. So you're giving it the same energy, the same vibe, the same commitment, the same mindset like you did the first time. So it's really dependent on you, how you choose to reframe that. You can either stay in the loop of, oh, I did not get it once before, and therefore that will define the rest of my career. Or you could realize that these people don't care. They're not looking for you in that capacity. Yes, they're looking for an applicant, but they're not here to try to figure out if you reapplied 3 times. If you present an application that is compelling, that speaks to your specialty interests, that has well thought through experiences, and your personal statement that targets the program, and you're signaling them, that speaks a lot more than the fact that you are a reapplicant. And frankly speaking, if you don't include your reapplicant status in your application, in your experiences anywhere, it'll be I would say it's really hard for somebody to try to figure out if you're a reapplicant. They're just looking at your application. They're not worried about all the other stuff. You're the one worried about that stuff. So don't let your own thoughts come in the way of what is potentially happening on the other side, because you're not there. You don't see. It's best to not make an interpretation out of it. Okay. And another thing that you want to do as you're working your reapplication is get help. You can get feedback even from non-interviewers, so people who did not interview you, maybe a senior from your medical school, maybe a colleague of yours who you went through the match with last cycle has matched. They may not be able to give you some solid feedback, but some people are wiser than others, and they may be able to say, hey, this is what worked for me. Maybe this is where I think you could pivot or change, right? Another area is using paid help. I'm a coach. I coach people through the application strategy. And I do that inside of the IMG roadmap. And now I have a membership that I'm starting where I'll be guiding people month after month, week after week in a private group cohort setting where you are with your peers and I'm coaching you guys together to get you towards building that application for the next cycle. So when you think about coaching, it shouldn't just be only for people that play sports. It could also be applicable for you if you are in that vulnerable situation and need more assistance, more help to realize what you can't see because you got your blindfolders on. And that blindfolder is a blindfolder of shame, the blindfolder of fear, the blindfolder of rejection, and coming and operating out of that place just never really gets you to your highest potential, right? So feedback can come from mentors, can come from alumni of your medical school, from seniors, from residents. Residents can give you really good feedback because they're right there in the thick of it. They know what their programs are looking for. They can give you real-time, real data, even much better than attending physicians, in my opinion. Okay, and that's across the board. So getting feedback will always help you. I want to also talk on the idea of a pivot. And the pivot is where you were going for specialty A and you end up having to now reapply into specialty B. And I guess it's not a reapplication because it's a whole new application, but you chose to maybe add a backup as a pivot plan, or you chose to switch altogether, like pivot altogether and seek out a whole new opportunity. That is not wrong, and you are not going to be faulted for changing your mind on your specialty interest, okay? Only thing I would caution you to do is if you're going to use the same application for more than one specialty, that you seriously consider if the specialties are closely related or not, because it may not allow for a holistic application that portrays your interest in one thing. It may be a little bit confusing to determine or decipher your interest when they're spread across so many different areas. So that may be the only area that I would caution you on. But a pivot is always a great idea because at the end of the day, if your goal is to get a job with residency and you are content with your backup option, it is not wrong to have a backup option. However, do not take a backup option that is not within your interests just to secure a job, because that will be one, a recipe for unhappiness for you, a recipe for quick burnout in residency, and a recipe for general imbalance in your life, because you'll never feel fulfilled there and you'll always have that self-doubt loop that keeps going. What if I tried? What if I went for what I wanted? What if I did what I really desired to do? So once you choose to pivot, you want to make sure that you're pivoting out of wisdom and you're pivoting out of a strategy, and you have a decision that you're willing to live with happily ever after, if I may say so. I want to close with this. I have worked with students who have applied and reapplied, and I'm actually still working with people who are reapplying into residency. And the common denominator that I see across the board is the fear that we're all living with. But I tell you, on the flip hand of that, I've seen people who have gone through this cycle 3 times, 4 times, who have ended up getting the residency positions that they've dreamed of. So the minute that you choose to stop applying is the minute that you actually don't get a shot anymore. And I understand this is a financially laborious process, so I say that with care. But I want you to seriously consider that giving yourself a shot again could be the thing that changes from you being unmatched to becoming matched. So don't minimize your willingness to give yourself the shot at reapplication in spite of the fear. And doing it afraid is probably the only way to do it, because it's never going to be a perfect circumstance. And if we don't go at it afraid, we'll never know what lies on the other side of our prior failure. To that, on this podcast, I've also interviewed, oh goodness, multiple IMGs who have been unmatched before. You can go to drninaloom.com/unmatched to get more resources on going unmatched, video programs, and a list of even podcast episodes that cover physicians who once went unmatched and who are now in practice and are happy to share with you what worked for them, how they pivoted, how they worked on their reapplication. I have a list through all different specialties: general surgery, internal medicine, pediatrics. Go in that list, drninaloom.com/unmatched, and start working on it right now to regain your confidence, to see what is possible for you, and to know that this is something you can do. And if you're interested in my membership, join us at imgroadmap.com. And you'll be able to come in to our bi-weekly meetings every Wednesday at 5 p.m., where I coach you in a group setting with your peers. And I also give you access to several other tools that are helpful for your residency journey. So to close, the reapplication is winnable. You can do it. You can win at this. You can do this, and you can get into residency. But it needs a different approach from the first cycle. And there's so much more I can talk to you about this, such as how to fill out that application this time around, how to write that personal statement differently, what you could be doing right now in your observerships and your clinical rotation so that your LORs read differently. And all of that I will teach you inside the IMG roadmap. So come work with me.